You're listening to The Murder in My Family, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including Missing Persons, DNA ID, Scene of the Crime, Zodiac Speaking,
Beyond Bizarre True Crime,
Citizen Detective,
and Campus Killings.
All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the podcast, its host, or sponsors. If you would like to discuss the murder in your family on this podcast, please be sure to visit themurderinmyfamily.com for more information. This episode may contain unsettling material or subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
Independent podcasts like this one depend on word of mouth to bring in new listeners. So if you find that you enjoy this show, please take a moment to rate and review it wherever you listen to your podcasts. And be sure to introduce a friend to the show and invite them to listen. With your help, The Murder in My Family can continue to grow and reach a new audience. To learn more about the show or the cases we discuss, please visit themurderinmyfamily.com. You can also find us on Twitter with the handle @murderinmyfam or on Facebook at facebook.com/TMIMF podcast. If you'd like to support The Murder in My Family and get VIP access to things like ad-free listening, early preview episodes, and bonus content of not only this show, but every other podcast on the AbJack network of indie podcasts, consider subscribing to the show with an AbJack Insider subscription through Apple Podcasts for only $4.99 a month or $49.99 a year. You'll unlock a variety of listener benefits and you'll be supporting the show in the process. Your support is greatly appreciated, and thank you to all of our supporters that generously donate to help keep the show growing and improving. One last note, please support any of the sponsors that you hear on The Murder in My Family the way that those sponsors support this show. It's with our sponsor support that the show can go on and continue to provide a platform to share these stories with you in every episode. Thank you. And now, on to our show. Welcome to this episode of The Murder in My Family. Today we are looking at a story that has left a tragic mark on a family's history. In this episode, I am joined by Angela Lewis, a woman whose life was forever altered by the devastating loss of her cousin Lisa. Angela's journey with Lisa began in her childhood years, growing up in Memphis. Lisa, Angela's first cousin and the youngest daughter of her mother's sister, quickly became a beloved fixture in their home. Despite their modest means, Angela's mother welcomed Lisa and her family with open arms. They had a bond that was more than just familial. It was deeply rooted in love and shared experiences. As they grew older, life took Angela's family away from Memphis, over 2,000 miles. Despite this distance, Angela tried to maintain ties with Lisa and her aunt. But the challenges of life often got in the way. It was not until years later, in 1997, that Angela returned home with her own children, eager to reconnect with her family. What she found, however, was a stark contrast to the progress she had hoped for. Despite the hardships, Lisa remained resilient, making lasting impressions on Angela's children, who still vividly remember her warmth and kindness. Then came January 6th, 1999. A day seared into Angela's memory forever. Lisa's mother returned from work to a scene that shattered their world. Lisa, pregnant at the time and on the cusp of fulfilling her dreams as a senior in college, was tragically discovered bound, gagged, and brutally murdered in her own bedroom. The investigation into Lisa's murder led to theories. Initially, suspicion fell on neighbors who were said to have been involved in drug-related activities. But as time passed, doubts emerged about that story. Fueled by an unrelenting determination for justice, Angela has committed herself to finding out the truth. Her advocacy goes beyond individual grief, and it extends into her entire family, many of whom continue to seek answers. Throughout this episode, we will look into Lisa's life, her ambitions, and the haunting questions that continue to plague Angela to this day. As you listen to the story, it is my hope that you will be driven to act. Whether it is sharing the story, signing the petition, or joining the Facebook group, you will find pertinent links in the show notes below.
It's my hope that someone who knows something will finally come forward and bring the missing pieces that law enforcement needs to hold those responsible for Lisa's brutal murder accountable for their actions. If you have any information that could lead to an arrest in the murder of Velecia Lisa Lewis, please call Crime Stoppers or go to crimestopmem.org. That's crimestopmem.org. You can submit an anonymous tip online, or you can call them directly at 901-525-5122. Join us as we honor Lisa's memory and strive to ensure that her story does not fade into silence. A story that demands justice for Lisa, Angela, and her family. This message is sponsored by Greenlight. The new school year is starting soon, and personally, I can't believe I have a 12th grader on my hands. If you're a parent, you want to make this new school year an opportunity for your kids to learn important life skills and continue building independence. For that, I recommend Greenlight. Greenlight is a debit card and money app for families where kids learn how to save, invest, and spend wisely, and parents can keep an eye on kids' new money habits. Then there's Greenlight's Infinity Plan, which includes the same access to financial literacy education that makes Greenlight a valuable resource for millions of parents and kids, plus built-in safety to give you peace of mind. With Greenlight Infinity, teens can check in without needing to actually check in, thanks to family location sharing. They can also call for help when they need it with SOS alerts that connect them to family members, 911, or both. There's even a feature that detects car crashes and will connect your younger drivers to 911 dispatch and alert emergency contacts if needed. With a chores feature that lets you reward kids for honoring their responsibilities around the house, you can help kids get into their fall routine more easily than ever. No matter which features make the most sense for your household, Greenlight is the easy, convenient way for parents to raise financially smart kids and for families to navigate life together. Sign up for Greenlight today and get your first month free when you go to greenlight.com/family. That's greenlight.com/family to try Greenlight for free. Greenlight.com/family. Welcome to The Murder in My Family. Angela, could you please introduce your first and last name for us, please?
Okay, my name's Angela Lewis.
Welcome. Angela, I know you're here because you have a murder in your family, and I feel like you've started to take on that advocate role in trying to move things forward. Can you share a little bit about your cousin? Can you tell us a little bit about Lisa?
Lisa is my first cousin. She's my mother's youngest sister's child, and she's the second of two girls. When we were growing up, so I'm 3 years older than Lisa, and there's a sister that's 3 years older than me, and I'm 4 years older than my brother. I have an older brother and had a younger sister, but it was us four. It was my younger brother, Lisa, and the older sister of Lisa, and we'll just call her Niecy. They always was at our home. So the reason why I'm so close to them is because my mom was so close to her younger sister. And we grew up, we didn't have a lot, but whatever my mother had, she shared with her family. And unfortunately, my Aunt B had less than what we had. So she was always at the house, always coming over. Sometimes for 3 meals a day, she would be there. It was like having two sisters, because I had a younger brother and an older brother. Didn't have a younger sister until I was about 12. They filled that void. And like I said, it was always there. We went shopping together. It was just like they were part of the family. And Lisa, like I said, she's 3 years younger than me. She was closer to my brother, so they played a lot. But I started noticing things. And I guess when you're younger, you don't put it together until you get older and you start to say, oh, this is why a certain person did this. But my Aunt B and Lisa's father was in a really bad relationship. And I remember growing up, he was not allowed to come into the home. So he would pick my aunt and her kids up. And it just seemed like he always came at the wrong time. But just me sitting back and just watching things, I started noticing that my cousin Lisa used to rock. And I just thought it was weird. Being a kid, I didn't understand what the rocking was for. And then later, I started to realize that she was comforting herself. So that's why she rocked consistently.
So when you say she rocked, was she like sitting down, rocking back and forth?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And like I said, as a kid, just looking at that, I thought it was weird, didn't understand. But once I grew up and started to see things and hear things, I realized why. But we left when I was 14. So Lisa would have been 11 when we left. And I tried my best to stay in touch, but moving 3,000 miles away, my mom stayed in touch with her sisters until she passed on. I grew up and had my own life and I don't want to say didn't look back. I tried to stay in contact with them, but life have a way of taking you and putting you to a different place. But when I had all of my 3 children, I decided it was time for me to go back home. I thought they would be old enough to remember. So I took all my kids back home. I met with all the family members and Lisa and B. And like I said, we all grew up in a real, not the best. We didn't have a lot. But to see everybody doing well for themselves, buying homes and having a good career was just awesome. But what I did notice with Lisa and B, their situation never got better. It, to me, was worse than it was when I was there. And this was in 97 when I visited. So I'll never forget, I took my kids to Lisa and my aunts B. They stayed together at this time. So they were in an apartment, and it was in the worst part of Tennessee, Memphis, the worst area you could be in. So anyway, I stayed over there visiting with them for maybe about 2 or 3 hours. I'll never forget when I walked through the door, she grabbed my baby because my kids at that time was 6 and 4 and 2. But anyway, she grabbed the baby and she said, "You just stay here. I'm going to take my cousins and we're going to go to my room." And she got snacks and she spent time with them. And the amazing part about it is my youngest child, he remembers her, but he remembers her. And he's got a really remarkable memory because he remembers her room the way it was when we went there. So anyway, I didn't feel comfortable asking why your situation never changed. So I never asked the question.
I want to go back to Lisa. Is there anything that, like, I know that it looked like she was going to graduate or she had just graduated from college.
She was going to.
She was going to graduate from college.
Mm-hmm.
And what was she studying?
She was studying to be a veterinarian.
Is that something that she was always passionate about, animals and helping animals?
Yes. I can go back when we were smaller. She would always take care of all the cats. We grew up with cats. And so she would take them and check them like she was the doctor. So we had to line them up and she would take care of them and make sure that everything was okay. So that was her passion. When she was younger, she said, "I want to be a doctor for animals." So that was something she was excited about doing. And I didn't know that she was even in school until after she had passed. So it's like I said, it just seems like everything about my aunt and my cousin was a secret. So I didn't know that she was in college. I knew afterwards that she had worked for the state of Tennessee as a social worker or something of that nature, but didn't know that she was almost done with her degree. And so I'm assuming when this happened to her, she was at home on winter break. But anyway, yes, it's sad because I don't know a whole lot about her.
Yeah.
Everything that I'm going to tell you now is, like I said, the last time I saw her was in 97 and it was brief. But when we was growing up, there was the distance between us. So I couldn't see her like I would used to when we were in Memphis. I didn't have the means to see her every day or even every other year. So what I'm going to tell you about her next is things that I've heard.
Sure.
And some of the things came directly from her mother.
I know you don't remember a lot and I know you weren't connected a lot, But is there anything else that stood out? Was she into music? What kinds of things did she like? I really want to just let the audience know as much as we can who she was and what was important to her.
I do know for a fact that she was into music. Kenny G was one of her favorite artists, all the way from Kenny G to Tupac. Yeah, she was into music, and she was a girly girl. I know that from visiting when I did go to visit her and saw her room. It was all pink and pretty. So she was a girly girl, but she also was a really decent person. She grew up to be a real loving and caring person. And this I know because her niece told me that she took care of her nieces. She has 3 nieces, and she took care of them, and she made sure that they had everything they needed for Christmas, even living in the situation that she was living in. She was a good person. I do know that much.
That's beautiful. And yeah, I got that sense that she was really just trying to make her way in the world and starting to get her feet under her. And it's really tragic that was cut short before she could even live that dream of being a veterinarian.
Yeah, I just at odd times, I can be sitting down at my desk or laying in the bed, and I see, you never question why God allowed things to happen. That's just the way it is. But I just don't understand why she didn't at least get to have her child, at least have, if it was even 6 months. She's always had a hard life. And now the child would be 25 and she would be 53 because I'll be turning 56. So she would be 53. Matter of fact, her birthday is July 27th. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned she was pregnant. And so I feel like there was a little bit of a complicated situation going on in her relationship or relationships. It seemed like there were a couple of men that were coming around. Can you talk a little bit about that before we get into what happened to her?
I can tell you what I've heard. And just from me reading the report, it just doesn't, I don't know. It doesn't seem like her, but I can't really say. But anyway, she was supposed to be in a relationship with a guy that was married. And then there was this other guy that she supposedly had been in a relationship with. So I'm not sure who the father is, but she was sure because she named the baby, gave the baby the father's last name.
And the father at the time that all of this happened was in the hospital, right?
There was one guy that was in the hospital for a back surgery, but he had gotten out before the incident, before she was murdered, and he was at work. So they did clear that he was at work. The other guy, him and his wife own a daycare. So they were in court for criminal charges. And I don't know this to be true, this part here. The reason why I say it was child related or child abuse is because in the report, when they decided to follow up, the police went to the wrong department. They went to child support instead of the court for the criminal court. And when they went to the court, the receptionist said, we don't have anybody on the books for this time. And I just thought that was odd that even though he was cleared, him and his wife, they were in court the whole time from 9 a.m., I think, until about 2 or 1. So recording of them going into court. So he had nothing to do with it. And the other guy was at work.
Okay. So we've got two potential people and then one who Lisa knows for sure is the father. Both are cleared. So on it's January 6th, right?
Yes.
So on January 6th, 1999, Lisa's mom leaves for work at about 6:25 in the morning and comes home to find her daughter locked in a bedroom. Can't find her at first when she gets there, right? She starts looking around, trying to find her. Notices some objects that are Lisa's that belong in her bedroom are now in the hallway. And then tries to go into Lisa's bedroom, realizes it's locked. And then did she kick the door down herself?
Yes, she tried to get in with a knife to pry the lock open, and that wasn't working. And then she, out of her mouth, told me she said, I kicked the door in. And when she was pushing up against the door, trying to get in, she was actually pushing up against Lisa because of the way she was positioned. It was done so she would see this.
It's horrific. So I know that this part of it's going to be really tough to talk about because of what they did to Lisa,
Mm-hmm.
because of the way that they killed her, but also the way that they tied her up and everything. But can we talk a little bit about the scene that your aunt finds when she opens the door?
Yeah. And this is coming straight from her because when she was able to talk about it, she actually told me, she said, when I got into the door of her room, the back was over her head and there was a rope tied around, and she was tied to the bed sitting on the floor. So she was tied to the foot of the bed. And she said blood was everywhere. And she said she said it was too late. She couldn't do anything.
I read that she had also been gagged, not just suffocated with a bag, but she'd also been gagged.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then she had been stabbed multiple times in various parts of her body, as well as having several defensive wounds.
Mm.
I know that your aunt said in the early interactions with the police, and also your cousin, your other cousin, her sister, as soon as the police asked who was responsible, they both said the neighbors.
Yeah.
So I guess there was an altercation between Lisa and the neighbors. And I know it seems like a lot of hearsay, right? Like the neighbor saying one thing, your aunt saying another thing, your cousin saying another thing about the fight, about the music, about the way Lisa reacted to them. So can we just talk a little bit about, I know you don't know firsthand, but I'm sure you've heard from the family and you've also read in the report. Anything you want to share about that? Yeah.
I don't believe it had anything to do with the neighbors or anybody that was doing drugs, because my aunt in the report says it was the drug dealers. And I grew up in Tennessee, and this doesn't seem like a drug killing over something that small.
Yeah.
And this doesn't seem like a neighbor dispute over, yeah, it was, they did have arguments over the music. They're turning up loud, so Lisa would do the same thing. And they went back and forth with that. But that wasn't just, this is my opinion.
Sure.
And it just makes no sense that a neighbor would kill someone or a drug person would kill someone in that manner. See, what happened is they stayed in the home, as you stated earlier. B left and went to work around 6. The last time Lisa was seen by one of her neighbors was around 9. So she was getting the mail and she went back. So my thinking is because they said that her body was in full rigor when they got there. So I'm thinking that the killing happened anywhere between the hours of 11 to 1, in between that time, because people heard noises and no one really did anything, but people heard things. I don't think it was a neighbor for a whole lot of reasons, because you would really have to be, it was, to me, it seemed like it was a little bit organized. It seemed like this was planned. And being a neighbor, and another thing that just bugs me, I've been in the apartment where she died, but what bugs me the most is how did they lock the door and get out with her against the door? My mom says she had to pry the door open and she had to push against it. And Lisa was sitting on the floor. So how did they get out? There's no other door for them to get out. There's, once you come into the apartment, Lisa's room is off to the right, and the living room is right there. And then down straight ahead, you'll see the kitchen. And then there's like a hallway that leads to my aunt's room. There was no way for them to get out unless they went out the window of her room.
And was she on the second floor or the first floor?
No, she was on the first floor.
So they could have potentially gone out the window, but there was no mention of a screen being pushed out or anything like that. And in fact, the police even said in the report that the person broke into the back door and went out the back door.
Yeah. And about the back door, this was in 2022. I visited Lisa's niece, and we were briefly talking about the case. And she said, there's no way. She said she don't think that anyone went out the back door. She said she actually think whoever this person was, Lisa opened the front door. And she mentioned how the keys, Lisa kept the keys because there was a storm door. Lisa kept the keys in her possession at all times. She would have to take them out of her room, open the storm door, and let this person in. And the reason why she said that is because the keys were left on the coffee table. So when she said that, now I hadn't mentioned that I had the report. She said that I couldn't wait to get back home to see if that was true. So I read it again, and it states in the report their keys were on the table. So that makes sense. Whoever she let in, she knew this person. And then for the back door, my second cousin said the door was always ajar, broken. She said it was never fixed. She said, so unless somebody kicked the door in, she don't think they came in that way. I think that was a ruse to make my aunt go looking toward the back door because she saw it ajar, but I think Lisa knew this person. I think she knew this person well. And a little bit about my family. We don't have people running in and out of our homes. That's just the way, to this day, that's how I am. I have to really trust you to allow you to come in my home. And living where she lived, I know she didn't have people running in and out. So it had to be somebody she knew.
It does seem, just based on the circumstances, like it's not just a random attack. And I didn't see any mention of anything being stolen either.
No.
So it wasn't a robbery. So I think that your theory does make a lot of sense, that it must have been somebody that she knew, somebody that had some kind of emotional investment with her to be that upset with somebody, to do that to them in that horrific of a manner. That doesn't just happen from a stranger unless it's like a serial killer or something, right?
Exactly. And that's the thing. I've talked this through so many times. If this was, let's say this was a serial killer. So wouldn't you want to let the neighborhood know that this is possible? This is possibly a serial killer on the loose with this kind of a crime. But this crime hasn't happened. I went back to see if there was any crime similar to that. That's what happened to my cousin. 8 years later, I think this was 2003, the Leicester Street killing happened. And the area was like 15 minutes away from where my cousin lived. And this was a family member. He killed all of his family members because he had a grudge. And so when I watched this, things were so similar, not the style of killing, but the emotions that was put into killing his family. It made sense to me, which family members, they have all passed on, and a few of us are still living that's around my age. They do believe that it was one person. And I won't call no names. I won't even say anything about this person. I'm about 100% sure it is this person because I've had close dealings with this person over the last 5 years. And we have vacationed together, been in my home because this is family, close family. And some of the things this person said to me, and I never let this person know that I had the report, but some of the things they said to me, like this: she was stabbed in the stomach first, is what I was told by this person. And I said, oh, really? And they said, yeah. And then they told me that they were involved with one of the people that were on the case, a sergeant, talks about this person all the time. He's passed on now, but the person I'm talking about used to work for Memphis Police Department, has real good connection with a whole bunch of the cops. Told me that when it happened, she called the coroner's office and asked them to make sure they take care of her. and trying to talk around without telling you who the person is.
So you are leaning towards definitely somebody that did know her, and definitely somebody that had connections that could potentially influence people to not take such a hard look at things.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm. And that's what I keep running up against. That's what I'm running up against. And this person, we have fallen out
Of
because
course.
we had talked about working on Lisa's case and trying to find something. And it's so funny. This is the funny part about it. When we were really supposed to be doing it, I'm sending this person messages and talking, what are you going to do? What you need me to do? And let's do this.
Mhm.
And this person tells me, I'm going to look into talking to some podcasters. Now, what's funny about that is I'm the one that's talking to podcasters. This person never had intentions on doing anything. I decided I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do, because when this happened in 99, I tried and they just shut the door in my face. Nobody would call me back. Nobody would answer any questions. The sergeant at the time would always say, Miss Lewis, we're looking into it. We don't have any information for you today. At that time, I didn't know that the person that I'm no longer talking to and the sergeant were in a romantic relationship. She told me that she was able to see pictures. He kept the case close to him, so she saw pictures. What I don't understand, he read the crime report, how much blood there was. I sent a letter to the DA, and I asked her if she could forward this to the cold case, because every time I called Memphis cold case, no one ever answered. So I was never getting through. So I decided if I send a letter, somebody would have to see it. So I send the letter. 3 weeks goes by. I don't hear anything. So I called the lady I sent the letter to, and she says, oh, yeah, I got your letter. And I forwarded it to the cold case unit. I said, okay. I didn't hear anything for another month. And I'm thinking, what's taking so long? I just want somebody to call me back and let me know they even had the letter. So I called again, the same lady, and I left a voicemail for her supervisor. And I said, I've been trying to get her to call me back. She's not returning any of my calls. I was able to speak to her one time, and I'm trying to track down a letter. So I never heard back from the supervisor, but that Monday, because I left a call over the weekend, that Monday, I get a call from her saying, I did give it to them. And I said, can you find out the status? Could you give me a direct number? I said, because every time I call their general number for the cold case, no one is picking up. And she said, I'll give you this number. And I said, could you give me an email address? No, I can't give you their email. So she didn't give me an email, but I did get a call from Sergeant Segrist. And so he says to me, I went out and I visited with this person, and she was more than willing to give me information. She was forthcoming. And I said, what did you ask to see all of Lisa's journals that she still has? And yeah, she said she would make them available when she could. And then he started asking me questions about my relationship with this person. He said, I heard you guys had a falling out. I said, it really wasn't at this point. It wasn't a falling out. I said, we had a disagreement about a case that doesn't even relate to our situation. I said, and she stopped calling. And then he said, she was really forthcoming and she's real helpful. And she said that she would bring me her journals when she has time. I said, okay. Soon as we got off the phone, before I could even set my phone down, she calls me and I didn't answer. So she texts me, could you please give me a call? And I blocked her. So I haven't heard from her since. But the part that really pissed me off was in my letter, I asked for them to keep my name out of it. Don't let her know, or don't tell anybody. This is my suspicions. And could you please don't let anyone know. And of course they did. So then he stopped calling, Sergeant Segrist. He never called, returned any of my calls. The last voicemail I left was maybe about a year ago. haven't heard anything from him. So then I decided I'm not going to give up this time. So I called the cold case. I started dialing numbers is what I did. I just started dialing in different prefixes, right? So I ended up calling and I got to the sexual assault unit and didn't know it at the time. So this guy seemed to be interested in what I had to say. And then so he started asking me questions, and then I gave him the case number. He said, I'm going to check into it and we'll call you right back. Still not knowing I don't call the wrong department, because when he answered the phone, he just said Sergeant, whoever he was.
Mm-hmm.
So he calls me back and he says, I can't even find a rape victim with this case number. I said, I'm not calling you about a rape victim. I said, I clearly told you this was a cold
Homicide.
case.
Yeah.
Yeah, homicide cold case. And he said, oh, that's my mistake. I said, so could you give me a cold case sergeant? So he actually was the one who actually got me to Sergeant Freeman. He seemed to, when I spoke to him, he seemed like he was going to do everything he could and told me, call me whenever you want to. And I'm here to help and all of this. And before we get to him, my son was helping me. So we started looking at the people who could probably review the case and tell me, am I just pulling for straws? And so we got this one guy, he read the case and he said, with all this evidence, such as the blood and the footprints, and I think there was a fingerprint, he said, there's a lot of evidence. He said, back then, they didn't have the skills to get this. He said, so let them know that you want to ask them to see if they can get some items and run touch DNA. Now, what's so funny about it, I used to work in ACEs, and it never dawned on me. And it just made sense to me that they had already done that. But so I send the guy and I talked to him. I said, could you go see if you could run touch DNA on some of the evidence you had? And he said, yes. Now, this started in January of this year. So he said, yeah, I'm going to go down to the warehouse, the crime scene warehouse, and see what I can get. I said, okay. So at this point, I'm not going to push you because I know her case is not the only case.
Mm-hmm.
So that was January. March, I reached back out to him. I haven't heard anything. Oh, yeah, we've been so busy. I'm still waiting. So when he said, I'm still waiting, I'm thinking that you've already sent it to be tested. And I said, okay. And so now I've worked in the APHIS. I know how long it should take, especially now you have a lead that you can look at. So now it's April. I don't hear anything from him. So now we're in April and now we're going into May. And I asked him, I said, did you ever get a response back from the DNA that you sent? And he said to me, it was pretty old and he hadn't sent it yet. Yeah.
Did he give you a reason why he didn't send it yet?
He said, it's really deteriorated and I don't think we'll get anything from it. And I said, but did you send it? I said, that's why you would send it, so they can tell you we can't find anything. And he said, no, I haven't sent it yet. I said, okay, so are you going to send it? Yeah, soon. So that was May. So I reached back out to him in June and I asked him about the crime reward. And he responded to me saying it's probably 1,000 or 4,000 now, if anybody knows anything. So after that, I reached back out to him toward the end of June and I said, did you ever send the evidence for touch DNA testing? I haven't heard from him since.
So I did have those questions in my mind, right? I saw that there was the fingerprint. I saw that there were shoe prints. And when I read the report, it sounded like they were describing a wedge heel.
Yeah, pie shape.
Right? Because that doesn't sound like an athletic shoe. That doesn't sound like really like a boot. It sounds like a wedged heel to me.
It sounds like a woman's shoe. I have a bunch of wedge heels in my closet. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that kind of backs up at least your thought about the gender of the person. So that was my first thought that hit me. And then the fingerprints, did they ever run those fingerprints? I guess if that person's never been arrested, it wouldn't matter, right? Like they wouldn't be able to find out who they were.
Well, let's say the person's never been arrested, but at one point in your life, I know I've been fingerprinted a few times. Not everybody, but majority of the people have been fingerprinted, whether it's for a job, and that's the reason I've been fingerprinted a few times. Whether you're going in because you actually committed a crime or whether you're just being eliminated from something. Those are three reasons somebody could have fingerprints. And living in that area, I'm quite sure this is not the first time this person has done something, maybe not even a killing, but some type of crime. So whoever was there, these are not new. They're not, I don't think it was just the one person. I think this person had people there with her. But this is not your ordinary killing. So it's not a neighbor is upset and come in and shoot a person, because that's normally how it would go if the neighbors were really having a dispute and they just start to fight.
Or stab, right? Like they might stab somebody, but to strangle them and
mutilate,
to tie them up and to kill an infant, a baby that's not even born yet. Yeah, that's not just over music.
It's not. I asked the last sergeant, the one that won't call me back, I said, she was in school. Did they talk? I said, I'm sure she had friends. Did they try to talk to her friends? Did they talk to the professors? And it wasn't publicized. So that's why a lot of people don't remember what happened to her. But the part that really bothers me is there was two men that were in Lisa's life. So at this point, talk to them more than you did. They cleared them. Talk to their family. We have a guy who lost a baby. So the last name of this child, interview that side. Nobody was, if you read the report, and I'm thinking that's all it is, it's 22 pages. There's nothing else. I did the FOIA and I asked for everything. And they just sent me the 22 pages. And I know it to just only be that, because whenever I talk to any of the sergeants, they said, ask, what report do you have? I said, I give them the report number. I said, 22 pages. I said, do you have something different? No, this is what we have. So if there is something different, they won't give it to me. But they didn't talk to any of the family. The only family members that they talked to was my aunt and her other daughter. They didn't talk to the cousins or the uncles or nobody that knew Lisa. And like I said, we were a close-knit family. No one talked to anybody. And I find that strange. When I asked the police officer, why wouldn't they talk to someone back then? And he said, we wouldn't talk to everybody. And that's why I'm not asking you to talk to everybody, just people that could give you a better picture of Lisa. You asked some neighbors about who she was, the same people that didn't like her, and they stated that she was crazy and her mom was crazy and that they stayed to themselves. That's in the report. One part of the report, it says that my aunt was walking around babbling to herself in the report after this had happened to my cousin. And the strangest thing to me is when I was talking to this person who I think is responsible for it, she tells me, yeah, I had to go sit with her and she had lost it. And she was walking around babbling to herself. She said this to me 3 years ago. So at that time I had the report. And so I'm thinking to myself, it's so odd that the neighbors and this person talking to me use the same exact terminology. Is it a coincidence or was this report padded? And then on top of that, what's his name? The coroner, O.C. Smith in Memphis. I don't know if you heard of him, but he was on the hook for saying that somebody had attacked him and tied him up with barbed wire and robbed him. This was the coroner that worked on my cousin's case. This happened in 2000. Yeah, in 2000, right after she died, he went, I don't know, crazy or whatever. And he's since passed on, but it's just weird how that stood out to me. So if you look at the autopsy report, you'll see his name on there. So because his name is on there and because of, not saying he did anything wrong, I don't know, but there's a lot of things I don't think no one touched on.
Mhm.
And I'm just trying to get someone to listen, to tell me that what I read, I'm not just seeing into this. You've read the report.
Yeah.
And it's not just me having a grudge against someone or making it something that it's not.
I can tell you that my initial impressions from reading the report definitely led me into this is somebody who knew her
Mhm.
thought process.
Mm.
And I had my own suspicions from reading the report. I don't think that you're making things up. I don't think that you're grasping at straws here. I think that you're being very logical at the way that you're looking at it. I think that there's a lot of things that are said in that report. There's a lot of things that aren't said in that report that make me start to have questions about certain individuals. I do believe that if you were presented with other facts that said like somebody else, you would probably look at those and try to understand it from that perspective. I definitely understand what it's like to get the runaround. I
Mhm.
definitely understand what it's like to feel like you're not being heard and to also feel like you're not getting the information. My heart goes out to you and to the remainder of the people in Lisa's life that still care about her and care about justice for her, because I know how devastating it is to have to deal with that and with the uncertainty, but also feeling like, in a lot of ways, I think that the authorities can gaslight the families of the victim
Mhm.
into saying, oh, you're just making a bigger deal out of this than it is, or just the way that, and knowing that they're busy. I don't want
Mhm.
people to think that I don't like law enforcement or I don't support law enforcement. I think law enforcement are an important part of our society. I think that there are people that are out there that are not doing things the way that they're supposed to be doing, that are not following the protocols that they're supposed to be following. And then there's people out there that are desensitized to this, right? They don't really, I don't want to say I don't care,
Yeah.
but I just feel like they're just a
Yeah.
little bit numb to all of it.
Agree with you on that. And it's what you said a moment ago. It's not that I hate law enforcement. I've worked in law enforcement for at least a total of 15 years, from Washington to Georgia. I was a detention officer in Georgia. I don't have any ill will against them. This is what I believe. It seems like there's some type of flag on the case, because I do believe that once somebody start thinking, yeah, I'm going to help you, and when they get into the case, there's something saying, don't go any farther. I've had two officers and the DA walk away from it. And so what I've done now is I've sent a letter to TBI, Tennessee Bureau of
Sure.
Investigation. I sent that at the beginning of this month. I know that there's something that's not right. It's something, it doesn't make sense that the sergeant that said, you can call me at any time and I'm going to help you and I'm going to be there, and how he apologized for, he was sorry for what happened and he assured me he was going to help me. That man has not called me, and now it's going on 2 months. That's something telling somebody to back off. And then when the first sergeant did everything I asked him, I asked for anonymity. Don't tell anybody, because I named people. I named the person that I thought. And I told him, I said, if I'm wrong, I said, I will apologize. I said, now I know it's messed up the relationship. That's something I have to live with. I said, but I will publicly apologize to this person. She was buried 6 days later, so didn't give family time to travel. The cleaning of the apartment happened a day after. She died on the 6th. This person was in the apartment packing up and cleaning on the 7th. Also in the report, it mentions that there was evidence that the police didn't find. I didn't know Lisa had a gun, but it makes sense she would have a gun. This person found the gun, the clip, and I think another journal. And what I didn't like about it, so the police said to this person in the report, well, could you meet me? And she mentioned she was going to the funeral and that she didn't have time, but they also said they were going to attend the funeral. So why not just put it in the trunk of your car and then take it? There was one question that a police officer asked, because they were trying to get in touch with, this is like the early part. The report, if you read it, it's all over the place. Nothing is just straight to the point. They'll talk about this and they'll jump to this, and then you have to. It took me 4 days to read this report, a 22-page report, to make sense of it and put it together, because it was all over the place.
It's written really weird too.
Yeah.
Like I've never read a report like this where the officer who's writing their portion of the supplemental refers to themselves as the writer.
Yes.
That was very confusing to me because I've never seen that. It's always like Sergeant.
Yeah, the writer. He was always named the writer. I thought that was odd too. I've read many police reports, and I've never seen a report. And I got 2 states to compare, so it was never like that. So I thought that was odd, but it was poorly written.
Mm-hmm.
The grammar was all over the place, and seemed like it was based on emotions. It didn't seem. I write reports. I know how to write a report, and I know how to tell the story without saying how I felt or what I believe. Because if you're writing a report, you have to make sure that you're sticking to the facts.
Yeah.
But one part of the report that really bothered me was when they asked the person, how did you get the name and number to her boyfriend and his wife? And the person replied and said that she had her address book. So they didn't find that. And then she mentioned, I got a gun clip. And I'm thinking, how do you go into a crime scene and you don't do your due diligence to take stuff that's pertinent to this crime? And she had all this stuff. She went back the next day. And when I questioned the first sergeant, I said, does it make sense that someone can enter a crime scene the next day? Well, it was no longer a crime scene, is what he told me. I said, after 24 hours, it's no longer a crime scene? No. I said, that's weird. Because I know in every other state, it's a crime scene, and they don't let you back in 24 hours later, less than 24 hours later.
Did that person turn over the gun clip and the gun and the address book? Have those been turned over to the police?
Yes. But
Okay.
The problem I had is that why was she able to find all of this?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you read in the report, it mentions that Lisa, she did write a lot. She journaled everything. And before I tell you this part, the person told me that she said, Lisa really hated me. And I said, well, don't say that. This is before I have information. She tells me this 5 years ago. I said, well, don't say that. I said, I don't think that's what was the case. And she said, yeah, she did. She said, because she wrote about it in her journal. So I said, oh, and there's a missing journal. So I don't know if it was. The funny thing about it is because it's like there's so much information.
Mm-hmm.
If I could talk to someone that's really listening, an officer, there's so many leads he could have and look into. And I'm not saying it'll crack the case wide open, but it'll point the finger. It really would.
And talking about ruling people out, right? Like, I didn't see anything that said they tested that shoe print that they found in multiple parts of the apartment. If you're going to rule somebody out, wouldn't you want to go to those people that are closest to the victim and say, hey, let me look at your shoes?
And then let's talk about the alibi, because it's mentioned I was called while I was at work. Lisa's nieces called screaming and saying this had happened to Lisa and all of that. So that's how this person got the call. She tells me out of her own mouth, she was standing around at work and laughing and talking to some people. And then she said, I didn't know what was going on. They were screaming. I told them to calm down. She said, and then I left. So I asked, where were you working? Person told me. So based on where this person was working, and then she mentioned to me, oh, and I worked a double that day. I said, okay. So we know a double meaning that you work all day. And so I said, okay. So I asked, I said, where did you work? And she told me the name. So I went and I did an internet search back to see this place where she worked in 1999. It's a dinner restaurant. They open at 5 and they close, I think it was 5 to 11 was the hours. So this restaurant that she worked in also had a lunch spot, but they didn't open till 11. And that spot didn't happen until 2003. So if this person worked a double, where did she work the double at? And then it's highly unlikely that this person worked a double because you have people who you still care for that you would have to see them off. So they didn't question any of that. So I went back. When I say I have a whole lot of research on what I think and what I feel, it's not adding up. There's no way you worked a double unless you worked for a different restaurant, because I know for a fact in 1999, this was only a dinner restaurant. They later opened up another restaurant, which is since closed in 2003. So where did you work your double at? I'm not saying that you couldn't have. It's possible you could have went to another. You could be working for 2 different companies, the same type.
But I feel like when they told you that they worked at that place and they worked a double, why are you leaving? If you do have another job, why are you leaving that out of the conversation?
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
And, and I didn't ask if you worked a double, I thought, but they say your conscience always speaks and tell on you. And it's just so many things. Like I say, if I'm wrong, I will eat crow. I will make a public apology, do whatever it takes to let this person know, yeah, I was wrong. But I'm not the only one that believes this.
So we're going to switch gears just a little bit as we wrap up this conversation, Angela. And I want you to just take a moment and tell my listeners how they can help support the Justice for Lisa movement.
Okay. So it's a Facebook page, and I post the podcast that I've done, and I try to just keep her alive. I'm not really into the Facebook thing, but anytime I post something on that page, it's just to make awareness and any other stories that I hear, because I want what Lisa never had. No one took the time to take an interest in what happened to her. No one wanted to even look at it. I don't care how long it takes. I'm going to continue to do it until, and something tells me that it's not going to take as long as I think. And that's what I have to hold on to.
So definitely, if you're listening and you want to support Angela and her family, go follow the Facebook page. You can find it in the show notes below. I believe there's a reward for any information that could lead to the arrest of the killer of Lisa. And if you have any information, I'll go ahead and put the phone number to call for those tips as well. I believe with Crime Stoppers, you can remain anonymous. So that is an option. And then you were putting a petition together for TBI to open this case and start looking into it. If we have that in time for the episode, that'll also be in the show notes. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to share your cousin's story. I'm sorry that you're in this situation, but I'm glad that Lisa has you in her corner and that B has you in her corner to help advocate for this tragedy that should have never happened. It is tragic that Lisa didn't get to see her baby grow up. It's tragic that B didn't get to hold her grandbaby from Lisa either. And it's tragic that you're here having to fight and ask for people to take this seriously. So my heart goes out to you and your family.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, I appreciate you and what you're doing, because I know it's not, people may think it's not a lot, but it's a lot to have a voice to express how you feel and just let everybody know that she does matter. And thank you for helping me to do that.
Of course. She does matter, and she's never going to be forgotten.
Exactly.
We'll make sure of that together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you once again for joining me for this episode of The Murder in My Family. We'll be back here soon with an all-new episode of The Murder in My Family, and I hope that you'll join me for it. But before you go, remember that every murder victim means something to somebody.